What we found is about 40% of working individuals, and again, it was a little higher in those under 40, are experiencing this in one way or another. There's procrastination, there's, difficulty taking into new information, there's difficulty completing important tasks, although you want to. It is fairly significant.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on all around us and explore the disruptive convergence of technology, business, and people. Here are your hosts, Ira Wolf and Jason Cochran.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. Thank you for being part of Googleization Nation. I'm Ira Wolf.
And I'm Jason Cochran. If you think this is just another podcast, think again. We're the voice of the most important conversations on the future of work confronting business leaders and people today. And our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of business, technology, and people.
Over the past few weeks, we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people about employee experience, employee engagement, belonging, caring, empathy in the workplace. We've had the privilege of interviewing thought leaders such as BetterUp's Gabriella Kellerman, Headspace's Jason Richmond and Sandra Kuhn, neuroscientist Paul Zak, Gallup's Vibhas Ritanji, leadership consultant and author Jacob Morgan. The collective knowledge we gained from these experts is a masterclass in putting the H back in human resources. And using the word masterclass might be a bit of an understatement. But we're not done yet, because in just a few minutes, we're going to bring on TELUS Health's Paula Allen. And she's going to share with us some jaw-dropping stats about the state of mental health in the workplace. And while you might not have heard about TELUS Mental Health Index until today, let me say that what I've learned in the last few weeks since I've been introduced to it, that the mental health index is, telehealth is what Gallup is to employee engagement. And let me just share this recent stat from the research, because in September 2023, just a few weeks ago, 25% of workers in the US have a high mental health risk. 40% have a moderate health risk, mental health risk. And let me do some quick math for you. That leaves only 35% of workers have low mental health risk. Let me repeat, only 1 out of 3 employees have a low mental health risk. And that sort of aligns with the Gallup polls that say that nearly 2/3 of employees are disengaged, only 1/3 are engaged at work. And like the history of employee engagement, despite billions of dollars invested in improving the mental health of workers, there's been little change over the last few years. So what are companies doing wrong? How can companies benefit by acknowledging that mental health of workers actually matters, not just giving it lip service? And it doesn't matter just for the employee. It matters for engagement. It matters for turnover, retention, profits, and even the company brand. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss our conversation with TELUS Health's Paula Allen. But before we get there, it's time for our weekly Perfect Labor Storm segment, where we focus each week on disruptive, surprising, or worrisome trends that we believe you should know. And today's stats are from telehealth's most recent mental health index. So between October and September, the mental health of workers fell 1.4 points. Part of the reason is that the financial well-being of workers is at its lowest point since the launch of the Financial Well-Being Index in April 2021, right in the heart of the pandemic. Why is this important? Well, financial well-being is highly correlated with mental well-being, which is highly correlated with turnover and productivity. A contributing factor for some workers is simple. Besides putting food on the table and keeping a roof over their head, 63% of workers don't know or aren't sure how much retirement savings they may need. 24% are concerned they won't be able to retire. And why does this matter? Because only 25% of those surveyed said it doesn't matter. As a result, mental health subscores such as anxiety, loneliness, and work productivity are the lowest for 17 consecutive months.
Gara, amid the major discussions you just referenced, kind of the backdrop of all this mental health piece too that's taking place is we've got some major groundbreaking things taking place at warp speed in the world of AI that at some point are probably going to become part of this conversation soon. Let me give you an example. Just last week, a company called Humane launched the world's first AI pen. You heard that right, PIN pen, almost like you would wear on your lapel, and it summons whenever it's needed. We'll see how consumer adoption goes with it, but what is quite clear is we're entering a new age of interactive computing in the human experience, where instead of using different apps for different tasks, we'll simply tell our devices in every language what we want them to do for us. Our friend John Sine says this is going to usher in what he calls the intimacy economy. That is, AI is going to become a companion in many of our human experiences. So, how does this relate to today's conversation on mental health, you might be wondering? Well, I want you to imagine with me that like wearing wearable AI, it's going to be able to give us real-time advice on spending while we're in the store. Or imagine it being a career coach or a guide or a mentor suggesting when it might be time to consider a new job or a new role. And then it helps you map out the exit strategy to your next phase of life from a career standpoint. Or how about this? What if it helped coaches you and mentors you when you're going through a really hard time, like the loss of a loved one? Could it be that many of the precipitating factors for our fears and worries driving the decline in mental health, as you mentioned from the Mental Health Index, that maybe one day it might be helped with AI? Believe it or not, futurists like Bill Gates are saying this reality that we just talked about, it's going to be here in the next 5 years. And so helping us unpack all of this around mental health now and also in the future is Paula Allen, the global leader and senior vice president at TELUS Health. She leads a team of data scientists, researchers, and experts in organizational health, communication, and behavioral change. And her focus is informing data-driven strategy and communicating insights in a manner that is accessible and drives productive action. So without further ado, let's give a warm Googleization Nation welcome to today's guest, Paula Allen.
Hello. I'm very, very glad to be with you both.
Paula, thank you so much for being with us. And as you heard at the top, we got a lot to cover today, so we're going to get right to it. But before we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the mental health piece, let's get to know you a little bit first. Tell us about you and the work you're doing and how you became passionate about mental health in the workplace.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey for me. I actually started with my passion around mental health in the first year of university. And what changed me, because I was planning to be a graphic artist or a lawyer, something very different, is I actually saw an image of a brain. And I saw that brain change. And I learned that the reason why the physical structure of that brain changed was because the person was experiencing unrelenting stress. And that blew me away. That took me back. That changed how I thought about mental health. And really the passion that ignited hasn't gone away, because I'm understanding just how important our experiences are, our perceptions are, our mental health is to virtually everything: relationships, work, our physical health. And I started as a clinician and moved into the corporate world and just kept asking questions around how could we prevent this, or how could we amplify this if it was something good. And that's led me to a research role, which I'm very, very passionate about right now.
As you were describing that, Paula, it took me back. I'm an old millennial. And so I remember in school those seeing commercials around "this is your brain on drugs." You remember, with the fried egg and the skillet.
Mm-hmm.
And that image was brought back to me. You're talking about unrelented stress and what it was doing to the brain, but that was the image that was going on in my head as you were describing that. So obviously a lot of the data that we talked about here at the start, that Ira was sharing the perfect labor storm that comes from your company's research on the mental health index. We got a lot of super stressed out folks that are really at risk for mental health factors. Can you kind of take a step back for us real quick here? And how do you think we got here? What's going on?
Well, we didn't get here overnight. We have been trending to a more vulnerable place for quite some time. So, on two occasions, the Surgeon General of the United States, for example, as one item, has sounded the alarm on our trend to being more isolated. So, not having as many of the deep relationships, not having people, like even in our own research, a quarter of us don't have anyone to turn to in a time of distress. And when you think about it, this is a consequence just of our adaptation to what's going on. So, in the if you look way back centuries ago, if you didn't have a tribe, a community, a group of people who had each other's back, you died, plain and simple. The elements killed you. You weren't able to get food on a sustainable basis. It just didn't work for us. So we had these connections as just a natural part of who we are as human beings. And then fast forward, I know we tested it during the pandemic. Each one of us is a little experiment. I know I could do my work from home. I could get my food. I could get my entertainment. There's a lot of things that I could do functionally without other people. But we're still human beings. And over the past 20 years, we have been moving and moving and moving to be more isolated, like these little micro changes, kind of like climate change, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And we don't really notice it, but the impact is great. And that exacerbated over the pandemic. So many of us were in a kind of a forced isolation situation. We were already trending towards this path, and we haven't really gotten out of it. We haven't, if you really kind of reflect, and we've done some of the research and said about 2/3 of us have not gotten back to the same level of interaction as we had before. And our relationships continue to become more superficial. And again, that started before pandemic and has just been exacerbated. And you mentioned AI. And I don't look at it so much as an AI issue, because AI is going to do things that are wonderful. We're going to have some unintended consequences that we don't like, just like every change. But the thing with AI is it's also going to exacerbate another risk, which is the pace of change in our lives. So we don't like change as human beings, no matter what we say. We don't even change that we control is stressful. Change that we don't control is super stressful. And the pace of change is really increasing. If you look from one century to another, many years ago, there wasn't that much change. If you look from 2001 to 2023, there's been a lot. And what your comments are around Bill Gates, we're going to see things move much faster, and that's hard. That makes us feel overwhelmed. So just those two things alone are a part of the impact that we're seeing.
You're speaking my language there, Paula. So I've been talking about this for a long time. In fact, my book, Recruiting in the Age of Googlization, it wasn't about recruit. The first 150 pages had nothing to do with recruitment. It was about how fast our world was changing.
Yeah.
And ultimately how that was going to impact that. And some of the listeners may have heard this on previous episodes, and anybody who is around me or listens to me anywhere, they'll hear it, because one of the limiting and this sounds weird, one of the limiting factors of AI right now is the ability of computers to process all the information that they're fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
So it has allowed us to process that information. But we're on the verge of quantum computing.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 50 supercomputers in the world that are processing all this information and all these huge data forms. But the moment that quantum computing comes online, the processing speed increases 168 million times.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to be able to process what would normally take the entire planet working 24/7, processing spreadsheets, to be able to do that in seconds. So we're just at the verge of this. So, as you said, we rip back we talk a lot about how the pandemic ripped back the curtain on engagement and a lot of things in our lives. But yeah, it's just going to accelerate. But as you were talking, there was a whole lot of different points. But the one thing that I want to address, because I know there's some listeners that are probably going to say, yeah, this remote work world thing is really what caused this. And you know, I I hope it really started a long time before that. I mean,
Yes.
mental health issues weren't, they were pretty bad before. It might have exacerbated it. But at the same time, you have proponents, and which I am one of them, and Jason, but proponents of hybrid work, also remote work, because it's also improved the well-being for many people. So on one side, we're saying, okay, all this technology working remote has exacerbated the loneliness, but at the same time, it's improved the well-being of others. How do we square that?
Well, we square it by realizing that human beings are complex, and not everything works for everyone, and that's sort of the challenge. Like it's very, very difficult to have a sweeping statement that one manner is better than other manner. There are some people who have, and some organizations who have thrived in that situation, but they have other things going for them. If you just throw people into a work from home situation and you don't have other strengths, you're still not going to be successful. They already have engaged people. They have people with a sense of belonging. They have a psychological safety, so you're not worried about what's happening when you're not in the office and who might be speaking about you. You have a colleague relationship, so even if you are working from home, you can reach out to people and have a connection, even from a video point of view. They've done their homework and they have the things that make a difference. If you don't have that, one of the things that really sort of gets me is when people think that there's this one strategy approach to solving all problems. So we're going to let people work from home. It's going to solve all our problems. Well, no, not unless you have the other things in place. We're going to do a 4-day work week, and that's going to solve our problems. No, if people in those 4 days are feeling anxious and overwhelmed and stressed, just making it one less is not going to take it away. So you have to have those foundational things. But on top of that, we have to realize that people have different work styles and needs. There are some people who have floundered because the way they are at their best, when they are at the top of their scale, they have structure, they have pattern, and perhaps the people who are working from home and doing well also have outside stimulation. They have things that actually, help them feel connected to other people outside of the work, as well as having a good work situation. And not everybody has that. Sometimes your only, work your only experience is work. The people that I'm most concerned about are those who are new to the workplace. So recent graduates from university. It kind of, even if you like something, it may or may not be the best thing for you. And having the experience of a work culture, what works, what doesn't work, how do people solve problems, visualize, like taking in information in real time, as we all do, even as toddlers, as opposed to just training programs. Organizations can make that happen virtually, but they can't make that happen accidentally. You can't just say, I'm not going to pay attention to the needs of my people because I've given them the one thing that they want, which is to work from home. Like it just abdicates responsibility.
Now, what you're alluding to here too, Paula, is, I mean, we now talk in terms of, we've got the research, epidemiological research, to understand that work is a social determinant of health. Like when we're going into the doctor should be asking us questions about, we need to talk about work. How's your boss? How's the culture? Because those things are just as impactful as, are you eating at McDonald's? Are you drinking too many Cokes and having too many fries? Are you not exercising? These things we're talking about now, we've got a wealth of research around it. And you referenced the Surgeon General earlier, Vivek Murthy, about just a little over a year ago, put out the framework for workplace mental health and well-being in the workplace. And so really trying to elevate everyone's awareness, not just business leaders, but everyone in general, that we're kind of in a public health crisis phase. And so with that being said, what I want to ask you is the mental health index that you do at TELUS Health. I was fascinated to hear about this and learn about it. Please introduce it to our audience and everything that goes behind it and what it's telling us.
Yeah, very happy to. We in our organization at TELUS Health, we have a really kind of privileged vantage point because we can look at workplaces and health from many different perspectives. So we support physicians, we have clinics, we also have EAP and expanded mental health services, disability management services, financial help, like a lot of things. So when you have that kind of broad perspective, what you get is a really good indication of what matters. And guess what matters? In all of those areas, mental health makes a difference. From a physical health point of view, you mentioned it being connected to financial well-being. It is the core of our experience and how we experience life. So how could it not matter? So with it being so important for individual health, relationships, work productivity, business success, all of those things, there really wasn't a clean, sustainable, real-time measure. And you've probably heard you can't improve what you don't measure. So measures were way too complicated. So we went about in 2017, and between 2017, we developed mental health index, we validated it, and very importantly, we were collecting benchmark information. And that's how we know that from 2019 to April 2020, we've had this massive decline. So we produce on a monthly basis, and we've seen ups and downs, seasonality, we've seen things that impact us, but we also look at what makes a difference. And I'd say if there was one key message, I'd want people to understand that our mental health has been literally reset. So from 2017 to 2019, we weren't perfect, but as of 2020, we've had this massive decline, and it really hasn't improved all that much. We've gone through the change and upheaval, and so many other things happened. We had polarization in our society. We've had our brains wrapped in that kind of, low level ongoing stress for a long period of time. And when you have that kind of situational experience, it's kind of like the part of your brain that's responsible for responding to stressful situations, fight or flight, that becomes so engaged, that becomes so part of your norm. And the other part of your brain that's responsible for empathy and emotional control, it kind of gets starved for energy. And then that balance shift can continue. So you have a trauma, just because the trauma is gone doesn't mean that the impact is gone. And we're still experiencing some of that impact. And on top of that, it's not like we went into, we had a collective stress vacation. we went into high inflation. We're having wars right now. Like there's a lot of things that are still keeping us in that highly anxious state. So all of that to say, we have to play the ball where it's at. I'm not here to sort of, flip people out. It's not possible to do better unless you acknowledge where you are, because you can't problem solve if you're deluding yourself. So we are in a more vulnerable state right now. So we have to make sure that we are taking action as individuals. But one of the beautiful things that we found in the index as well is those organizations who invested significantly and visibly in the mental health of their people, those people did better through this storm. So organizations can make a difference.
I love that last part in particular, that we have evidence that when you focus on it, you put the interventions in place that we're moving the needle on those things. Just one more question about the mental health index, because I know this is the first time a lot of our listeners are hearing about it, Paula, as you describe it. We don't want you to give away all your trade secrets, but can you kind of give us an idea? What are the types of things that are measured or captured in it that go into the overall scores that we get on it?
Well, and I'm happy to answer, because one thing I will say is that we're doing it not for just our benefit. Like, obviously we use it as an organization to help make sure that we're doing the right things, to help with the issues that matter. But it's free and publicly available. It's on our website. You just type into a search engine, mental health index, TELUS Health, it'll come up. For individuals, we want individuals to have insights, and for organizations, we want them to have some guidance. And we look at people's experiences. So we took, over 300 indicators and boiled it down to a set that make a difference, where we're looking at people's experience of anxiety, their optimism, their isolation, indications of depressive experiences. So we put that and a few other things all together in our index, and that helps us really measure where people are across the board. So it's sensitive to people who have illness, but it's also sensitive to your level of well-being. And I'll just add one thing to it. When we were doing our research in what matters, we looked at everything. And one of the things that came up was financial well-being in a particular way. So the presence or absence of emergency savings was one of the strongest indicators. It wasn't just overall well-being, like your knowledge, all of that was important, but the presence or absence of emergency savings, regardless of your income. So there is something about having that safety net, that cushion, that realization that you can withstand the ups and downs that always happen in life. That helps with your mental resilience, or if you don't have it, can drain it.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we just last week we had our quarterly panel with Odeon Capital Conversations Group, and we were talking about that. We were talking about the wealth gap, and we're talking about it's not only there's this 1%, but that's such an extreme, which is different than the top wage earners. But between the top wage earners and the average and lower wage earners, the gap just is so wide because there's the people that are draining their savings, the people that are still spending. There are people with a lot of money, but it distorts that because there's other people still trying to figure out how to skimp at the grocery store. Groceries, gas prices, we just heard yesterday or a few days ago, have come down. The price of eggs has come down, but it's much higher than it was. But most groceries are still higher than they were a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago. And so, keeping a roof over your head and some of the basic things which I mentioned earlier, keeping a roof over your head and basically keeping food on the table is still a challenge. So it's not, and I know, and we'll get into this when we come back from the break a little bit more, but people are concerned about retirement. And for somebody who's 20 or 30 years old, it's like, okay, I'm worried about putting food on the table, feeding my children, being able to get childcare, to get a job. I mean, all these stresses that are there, and retirement's, far out, but there's a lot of older baby boomers that are still working, some because they want to, most of them because they have to. And they're also dealing with caregiving, not only sometimes their grandchildren and kids, but their parents.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I know somebody pretty close that's got a mother, father, and a disabled brother
Yep.
while
Yeah.
holding down a full-time job.
Yeah. And we definitely saw that in our index as well. So many things in what you said. So Jason, you talked about the social determinants of health, and a lot of them are related to where you are in an economic point of view. Housing, stable food, having a job, having access to health care, like all of those things and more. But we also have a phenomenon happening right now where there's really a challenge in terms of people's loss of their expectations. I mean, we have a society, and our index looks at working people. We have in our society an expectation that at a certain point you'll have a home, at a certain point you'll be able to retire. Like That's sort of the TV picture book. And both of those things are at risk. The price of housing is challenging, and being able to retire, people are starting to rethink that. And I also think people underestimate caregiving. We are living longer. We at a certain point, you passed the late 70s, sometimes if you were lucky into the early 80s. We now, as working people, most of our parents are going to live into our 90s. We're probably going to live to 100. That's sort of the way it is, but it's not necessarily a healthy 90 or a healthy 100. And 11% of our population, when we looked at it, 11% are supporting adult children. So again, with it just difficult for people to sort of have that footing after school, have that job where you're able to buy a home and take care of yourself and move on. That's not necessarily happening, and that's impacting the newest generation in the workplace because of the loss of expectation, but it's also impacting their parents.
Oh, there's so much to unpack there, but we're going to take a quick break. But there's two things, and I know I will lose these right away. You talked about lost expectations. One of our friends of the show, a good colleague of ours, and Jason mentioned him earlier, John Sani. I met him during the beginning of the pandemic. And I don't know if this is what caught my attention to him, but he talked about what people were suffering the most was the loss of future memories, that they didn't think they could achieve what they would have. And that just stuck with me. And he always comes up with these metaphors and analogies and things, but the loss of future memories, that I'll never be able to create that for someone is and so as soon as you said lost expectations is very similar. So we'll throw some more vocabulary at you. But when we come back, we definitely want to dig in the remaining minutes that we have into some of the differences, because we talked about, when we went into the discrepancy between hybrid and work, and some people have higher well-being and some people are lonely because of that. There's a lot of differences between industries, between manager and non-manager jobs. So again, this average that we put out as a mental health index, some people are doing better than others, and obviously the reverse is also very true, which what we're really concerned with is the people who aren't doing as well as other people. And the expectation is we're doing pretty good because there's this average. So we're going to take a really quick break. This fits into the line because we're going to talk a little bit about growth mindset. You're listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We're talking with Paula Allen today from TELUS Health, talking about the mental health index. We will be right back.
Are your employees feeling stuck and just showing up for a paycheck? Is your workforce working harder to get back to normal than adapting to the future? It's time to help them break their addiction to certainty and develop a growth mindset. Developed by one of the world's top-rated future of work thought leaders, AQ Plus Mindset is a powerful tool to help your employees embrace change, adapt faster, and grow on the job. Conveniently delivered to any smartphone or laptop in easy-to-digest 5 to 10-minute lessons. Managers can sit back and watch employee attitude shift towards growth and innovation in just 30 days. Are you ready to help your employees thrive in this ever-changing, never-normal world? Encourage them to show more grit, resilience, adaptability, and unlock their potential? The journey to a growth-filled future starts with a growth mindset. Visit aqplusmindset.com or call 484-373-4300.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We're here today with Paula Allen from TELUS Health. We're talking about mental health index. Paula, when we left off, we were talking about digging in a little deeper into some of the differences that you found. And again, this is all data-driven. You've got enormous data, and I highly recommend everybody do their search not right now, as soon as the show's over. Do a Google search for TELUS Health Mental Health Index, and you'll be able to look at all the reports. But I have two questions. One is, having done these for a while, was there anything that absolutely shocked you when you saw the results? But beyond that is, there are differences. There were differences between genders. There's differences between age groups. There's differences between industries. There's differences between different roles in the company. Can you give us a highlight a little bit on some of the biggest gaps?
Yeah, if I were to choose one, I would say the age cohort gap. And we did find something that was a bit surprising. So we've known in mental health for many years that your stage of life matters. Like when you're going through a period of, a lot of change, just to the point of change that we'd mentioned before, such as, early adulthood or transitioning to retirement or whatever, when those big life changes happen, it's difficult for people. And we see changes in mental health. And there's also, physical changes that, of a hormonal nature that happen at different life stages as well. So it's not surprising that at a certain life stage, like when you're in your early 20s, late teens, early 20s, that there's higher risk. However, the way we've been seeing it now is quite different than the way we were seeing it before. So it's less of an age issue and more of an age cohort issue. So by that I mean those of us who are younger are just because of everything that's happened in our society. Like if you're born into this high pace of change, if you're born into a society that has all these isolation risks, if your major sort of developmental milestones have been impacted by this sort of societal trauma, which was the pandemic, it impacts you in a way that's not related to age. It's your cohort. So what we found is two things. One is that the high risk that we typically see in under 20s, like early 20s, that same level of risk or similar risk is going into your late 30s, early 40s right now. Actually, the break point was about 40 in our data. So people are carrying that risk. And for workplaces, it really sort of makes a difference because you're going to have the dominant demographics in your workplace have higher risk than the generation before. The other thing that we found that was the most surprising, like even our data scientists were just testing and testing over and over again because we couldn't actually believe it. In 2019, we saw a difference of about 2 points out of 100 between those who are under 40 and those who are over 40. So those who are under 40 had a mental health that was about 2 points below. It's noticeable, but it was, not massive. At the beginning of the pandemic, that increased to 15 points. Okay? And later on, so as recently as this summer, it's increased even further. So the difference in mental health, so it's not just there was a difference and that difference continued with everybody declining. Those who are younger declined more than those who are older. And as we're in this sort of, hopefully a recovery period, we're seeing the differences exacerbate even further. So we'll continue to track this because I do think that there's definitely something that we need to understand. So coming out of the pandemic, why is the younger generation actually getting worse as opposed to starting to normalize? And I also think that we need to really pay attention to the pace of change on a number of different levels because we were talking about AI. And people are talking about it in terms of the good that it will bring and helping us make decisions faster. You had the spreadsheet example. There's a big opportunity for improving healthcare. But I also worry about work experience. If we take away the things that we call mundane right now, is everything that we do then intense? We need kind of ups and downs and ebbs and flows. Like, myself, if I'm working on something and I have a lot of, pressure on my brain, I might go to a PowerPoint that I was working on and change the color of fonts and just do something to kind of, clear it up. If our work structure is such that we've removed everything that gives us that kind of an ebb, like, there's a lot of opportunity for us to be much more tense because the intensity of what's being asked of us is more. So we do have to pay attention to work structure and how that impacts us going forward.
Yeah, Paula, that's so interesting because just about a year ago we had Stephen Kotler on, and we talked about flow and getting into that, which talks about we need periods of rest to rest our brain. I've certainly fell deep into the world of neuroscience and understanding that, and people don't recognize that it's not just physical work, that our brain, although it makes up only 2% of our total body, it uses over 20 to 25% of all the energy that we have. So it's exhausting. So if instead of we're just thinking, we're just sitting at a desk and trying to focus, and we're trying to use 30 or 40 or 50% of all the energy, no wonder we're exhausted from that. But you right before we went on the air, and there's so many roads we can take on this. We definitely have to have you back to talk more. But you talked about one of the findings you had was the impact of the brain on the brain of all the stress and why this really matters. Because obviously, if our brains are stressed out, people aren't thinking, they're going to make mistakes. They're not as productive as they need to be. It's forget the mental health part, and I don't mean that lightly, but it's just that what employers are striving for is how do we grow, how do we innovate, and how do we produce more, and how do we become more efficient? And we can't possibly do that when everybody's brains are not only at capacity but over capacity and tired. And you talked about something called brain fog, the brain fog that you're seeing. So can you share that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. What we found is about 40% of working individuals, and again, it was a little higher in those under 40, are experiencing this in one way or another. There's procrastination, there's, difficulty taking into new information, there's difficulty completing important tasks, although you want to. It is fairly significant. And there are a few drivers of that. Number one, if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you have this kind of base low level anxiety, if you have some of the things that are being surfaced in our mental health index, it takes a lot of your energy. If you have something that you're worried about, or you have just this low level, undifferentiated anxiety just because change, or you don't have that social connection, like it actually saps you. So there isn't even an opportunity for you to actually be at the top of your scale because something else is going on. So this is so important, because when you think about what can cause on an individual level, you think about maybe like a high performer, and they want to do their best, and they're always trying, they're always expecting to overachieve, and they're having this like drag on their brain, like many of us are having. What ends up happening? Well, that person's self-esteem is impacted, and they go through a bit of a cycle about, have they lost it? Are they, is somebody going to find out? Is this imposter syndrome? Maybe it was a fluke that I was successful before. They look for quick fixes, such as alcohol, drugs, things that'll make them feel better in a short period of time. And we've seen increases in the use of unhelpful substances as well. From an organization's point of view, what are organizations wanting? So we can have all this lovely AI, but none of it is going to make any difference if you don't have people who know how to harness it, if you don't have that innovation around how to use it, if you don't have an organization with the resilience so they can adapt to it. You have all this power in your hand and it fail because you don't have your people at their best. Like, that is the failure point. So, being able to help people cope in two ways. One is that we have to help people on an individual basis. I mean, there are ways that we can help coach and structure time and, help people get beyond the symptom, which is the brain fog. We have counseling through EAP and other programs that can help people get to the root of some of the emotions that they're having, the sensitivity to stress, and develop coping strategies and deal with some of the trauma that might be from the last 3 years or otherwise. Well, we also have organizational interventions. We know that there are certain definitions of culture that are healthier, where people are more productive. And all of that starts with training your leaders, because the behaviors of your leaders, all of your leaders in aggregate, is one of the biggest cultural pivots.
Well, Paul, I can't believe we're coming up to the end of the show, and we've barely scratched the surface here in terms of the report, the findings, the insights and wisdom you're sharing with us. But before we kind of start moving into our lightning round, there's one more question I want to ask you. We got to ask it because we're a Future of Work podcast. So I want you to make some predictions for us on the future. When you think about the future of mental health, and let's say particularly within the workplace, what do you see? Pull out your crystal ball. Tell us what you see in the next few years.
Well, in spite of everything that I've told you, I am extremely optimistic about the future of work and the future of health. I actually think the future of work is quite friendly and accessible. And I think what's going to happen is that we're going to go through a period of time where we learn some pretty hard lessons about what makes a difference and how organizations need to function, how they need to interrelate with people, and also about self-care and how our relationships with others matter. So, the more that we pay attention to the reality of the situation, the smarter we'll be and the better opportunities we'll have.
And that's great news. But I have one question that we ask all our guests as well before the end. This is a layup for you. Was there anything that we should have asked you that we didn't? Was there any pressing issue that you just got to get out?
The only thing that I might say is I do think that people need to understand how malleable the brain is. Like we talked about the impact of things on the brain, but it goes the other way as well. So, when we change our experiences, when we have support, things can make things can change. And I think it's important that we do. A part of it is, when we're talking about, the older generation sort of financially helping their children. One of the things I thought was super interesting is that we also asked people who had children over 18 what was the number one support that they wanted. And we expected it to be tuition assistance or home buying assistance. It was support for their mental health. So the number one thing that was asked of people who had children over 18 was support for their children's mental health. So, that's sad in one sense, but hopeful in another, because, people don't ask for help if they don't know that help will work, and it will.
That just blew my mind. And it also warmed my heart that is the number one that they're looking out for, is the mental health. And so it just goes to show the work that you and your team are doing at TELUS Health of trying to get parity, more awareness around mental health and its importance. We remove these stigmas of being able to talk about it, of being able to build strategy around it, that it feels like we're making progress. And thank you for sharing that with us today, Paula, and all the incredible work that you and your team are doing to help us get that progress to where we are and where we're going. We're going to switch into the lightning round now. We're going to ask a few questions to get to know you a little bit better on a personal level and help our audience do the same. So let's start with this one. Let's get to know your musical taste a little bit here. How about a favorite song or musical artist or band?
Oh, I've got two, very different: Elton John and Bob Marley.
I love that. That is quite the dichotomy. I like both of them as well, and that's also the first time we've gotten Elton John and Bob Marley on the show before for that answer. So I love it. So are there certain types of things where you're doing something and you're in an Elton John mood and then in a Bob Marley mood?
I don't know if there is a difference, but either one will put me in a good mood. And I learned early on, if you're in a mood that's not great and you play music that makes you happy, your mood changes. So, I leverage music all the time for that reason.
I love it. I love it. And how about this one? If there's one person in the history of the world that you could meet, who would it be?
Viktor Frankl.
Wow.
Mhm. Yeah. The life search for me, like virtually everything, it's he's the view of the world from the position that he had and how he was able to communicate that has influenced my life in a significant way. So I would love to say thank you.
I love that. One of my favorite books as well, Man's Search for Meaning. We highly recommend anyone out there listening, if you haven't read that book, it is life-changing, just like Paula said.
Mhm.
And then Paula, how about this one? If there were one place that you could go, you got a free ticket to go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Oh, this is so odd that it just popped into my head. It's not a vacation place, but probably where I am, because that's where my family is. I love it when we are together. I'm fortunate to have a wonderful family, and my happiest moments is when we have the multiple generations together. So I'd probably drive, 5 miles, not too far.
I love that answer, and how appropriate for you for all the research you do on loneliness, that you said the place you want to be is with your family, and we want to help a lot of other people feel that way too. So we
Now,
absolutely love that.
if everybody could be transported to Tokyo or Paris, I wouldn't complain either.
Right. Absolutely. Who knows? Maybe we'll get there one day with wormholes and stuff like that. No telling. We never thought we'd be at this point of talking about wearing AI pins. Maybe we'll be talking about time travel or extraterrestrials visiting Earth here, in the next few years too. Who knows? But Paula, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing wisdom and insights from TELUS Health, the Mental Health Index, to help us better understand mental health in the workplace. Really quickly, what are some ways people can get in touch with you and learn more about the work you're doing at TELUS Health?
Yeah, I'm happy if anybody wants to connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. I try to share as much as I can that's valuable. I really do urge everyone to go on your search engine, type in mental health index, TELUS Health. We have a wealth of information there, but we try to make it easy because there's a way you can subscribe and get each report as we publish it each month free in your email box. Because the number one thing that is going to be helpful is if we have knowledge, because then we can take the right types of action.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paula. It's sounding like a broken record, but each week we just learn so much, and just when we think we're starting to get a handle on the workplace and mental health and belonging and mattering and well-being and engagement and experience, we learn something new. And you hit it off the head in the beginning. It's like we're really complex, and there's no one answer, but we're working on it. We're getting there, and hopefully AI will actually help us digest all this new information and make us better. So really appreciate your time. Just for those who are listening and not watching, TELUS is TELUS, TELUS Health. And then if you just search for TELUS Health Mental Health Index, you'll have access to all of this, or go to TELUS Health and you can learn more about the organization. Paula, thanks very much. Coming up on the holidays, so hope you have a great holiday. I'd love to get you back in the beginning of the year or sometime in next year, because this story is just going to continue to evolve. So appreciate it very much. Thanks.
My pleasure. Great speaking with you both.
Thanks, Paul. That was a really deep dive on mental health and the work.
But barely scratching the surface.
Right.
I mean, the more we dig, the more we realize it's just this rabbit hole.
It is complex and it's so nuanced. I think for me, my biggest takeaway today, I was totally unaware of, was her stat on 40% of folks experiencing brain fog on the regular.
Yeah.
That's alarming. And there can be a multitude of symptoms in there, but that 40% of people are experiencing the brain fog, that's just alarming. And it just goes to show that we really are struggling with the pace of change. We're struggling with the things required of us at work and life. And we've got to slow down, and we've got to think about some better ways of getting support systems in place to help folks through this if we want to get through the brain fog. Because 40% of folks experiencing that's a huge number. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about turnover and productivity and stress and all those things, yeah, that all the numbers seem to align up too with that, with employee engagement surveys as we talk, and why are so many people disengaged? Why are so many people lonely? Why are so many people struggling? And then, well, if it's 40% of the 70% that are disengaged, that's 60% that are walking around with brain fog. My takeaway, it goes back, it's something that Paula mentioned at the end. Related to that was, that we think that how impressed she is that our brains are malleable. And the technical term for that is neuroplasticity. We talk about that all the time with neuroscience. And I've recently, my article this week in my newsletter about that, which is free for everybody, was that that we still have a lot of people that think that success comes through the school of hard knocks, that you have to just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, put your time in, put those 30 years in till you get a reward. And we have a lot of managers who are thinking like that, and it just goes, it doesn't help. And the other one is the old myth of old dogs can't learn new tricks, and that's absolutely false. We can continually do that. We learned a lot of the stories that we heard about, how our brains work, that, you're just too old to learn and our capacity goes down. It may get more difficult, but it's not even improbable or impossible. It's just that it's more attitude than it is physiology.
And that's right. And thankfully, we are hardwired that way because we're going to have to do it whether we want to or not. We got to
trying hard.
as
the older baby boomer in the group, I'm trying hard.
And you're doing a great job. You're a great example for everyone. And that's what we got to do. We got to continue learning and unlearning and become mentally flexible and work those muscles. We want to thank everyone today for tuning in and for watching and subscribing to the show. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please do so. Find us on YouTube, find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, and subscribe to the show. But until next time, I'm Jason Cochran signing off.
And special thanks to Googleization Nation and all our listeners and all our partners. We continue. I just checked our stats this morning, and we were in the top 100, I think 72 last week or sometime this week on management surveys on for Apple, and on Good Pods we were number 1 last week, and I think we're still in the top 5 for leadership on Good Pods. So we appreciate that everybody doing that. If you can leave reviews and continue to spread the word, really appreciate it. Thank you for thanks for being part of Googleization Nation. And until next week, remember, don't let the shift hit your plans.
Thanks for listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. This show was produced and edited by Hilton Productions.